Fearful villages see the U.S. using Afghanistan, written by Imran Feroz. And it basically goes, there's this province, Nangarhar, in eastern Afghanistan, and it's bearing the brunt of U.S. airstrikes. Because they've just declared the whole province an Islamic State. And this article goes into people there just like the U.S. and NATO and coalition forces and the Afghan government. They don't trust any of them. They think everyone's a terrorist, and they just bomb indiscriminately. On July 23rd, one of those strikes reportedly killed at least 8 civilians, including children who were attending a funeral, allegations of which the U.S. military is investigating. Like half of July's U.S. airstrikes in Afghanistan, at least 358 strikes, that's a lot, took place in eastern Nangarhar, according to the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. And according to the United Nations data released last month, U.S. strikes in Nangarhar are more likely to result in civilian casualties than strikes anywhere else in the country. And they interview people in the region, and they're like, yeah, we got a lot of airstrikes under Obama for sure, but they've definitely been ramped up since Trump is in office. So he's just, I mean, it was just like, oh, I was getting the shit beat out of me by this one guy. Now there's a bigger, dumber bully that's beating the shit out of me more. It's just unbelievable. And we're just killing civilians indiscriminately. And what is happening is there's the Intercept did interviews with people this past May. Villagers in Kogiani, a Taliban-controlled district of Nangarhar, described living with the threat of U.S. special operations ground raids and regular drone strikes. Few foreigners visit Kogiani, and even Afghans from the provincial capital, Jalalabad, prefer to avoid its villages, where insurgents rule the ground and U.S. warplanes hunt the skies. A few days ago, another drone strike took place. The victims were innocent farmers and their women and children. Said a driver from Baskeel. Just bomb, 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 bomb. I remember I'd been to Jalalabad. I did a Marine Corps base there in April of 2006, just outside of Jalalabad, which is very near the Pakistan border in eastern Afghanistan. And then the next day we were flying back to Bagram in a helicopter, me and a comedian, a woman by the name of Shema Tosh. And we got into a firefight on our helicopter, and this like 40-minute helicopter ride was supposed to be, it ended up being like an hour and a half. It was crazy. We deployed countermeasures. The gunner right next to me was shooting, and like spent bullets were hitting me in the face. It was crazy. It was April 27, 2006. And I remember that day because I thought, like, I remember sitting in the helicopter going, wow, I might die today. And I'll remember that show quite well. We did it in a gazebo that was built by the South Korean army, and we just had a light shining right on us. And so there wasn't really any lights past it. So maybe 10 feet or so past the stage, you saw the guys sitting in the front. It was mostly Marines. But then just past that, there was no chairs or people sitting on the ground or standing, and you'd see guys smoking cigarettes. So you'd just see this orange glow of the cigarette, and then you'd hear laughter. And after the show, they were like, man, you're a badass. I go, why? I go, you're sitting there with the light on you with your back to the enemy. Man, you're a badass. I was amazed you didn't get hit by a sniper. Oh, good times. Dumb comedian doesn't know he's a target. But back to this. So I've been in that region. Doesn't make me an expert in it in any sense of the word. But I've been in there, and there's you fly, and Jalalabad is a pretty big city, but then you see these little poor villages, and that's what they're up in the mountains, and the Taliban can get in there pretty easily. And, it's a war. I don't even know why we're still there. And yet we're just bombing and killing civilians, and nobody cares. And we just had a, neo-Nazi terrorist drive a car through a bunch of protesters in Charlottesville, Virginia. And, our president wouldn't denounce it. He finally did, but it was just some sort of empty blah 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 is, all right, I'm supposed to do this. Like, who cares? Like, why does he need to do that now after we didn't know? He doesn't care. He's been a racist his whole life. He doesn't give a shit. The Nazis helped him get elected. Why does he fucking care? And this is what happens. Now we're just killing civilians because the wealthy and the powerful, they don't view them as human. Oh, they're just all, filthy, whatever, Middle Eastern, towel heads or whatever. Kill them. And we're killing civilians. And here's the thing, that the people fear drones so much they pull their SIM cards out of their phones, because that they've figured out the United States tracks and identify targets based on unique codes in their SIM cards. The London-based Bureau of Investigative Journalism, which keeps a comprehensive list of public reporting on strikes in Afghanistan, relies largely on local press reports and statements from U.S. and Afghan military officials, which do not always specify where the strike occurred. U.S. Central Command did not respond to the request for comment on the allegations of civilian casualties in this article. Yeah, Central Command, these hippies over at the Intercept are just mixing it up. And to give you, just to show you how they're operating. So in April, when Trump dropped the mother of all bombs, right, on an alleged ISIS hideout, Afghan government reported that more than 90 ISIS militants had been killed. The Pentagon refused to provide a number, and the U.S. and Afghan military blocked access to the strike zone, preventing outside observers and journalists from entering. They're just bombing indiscriminately in a war that never got congressional approval, and they're killing civilians, and there's no checks and balances. There's no nothing. And the mainstream media here is just, Trump, the mother of all bombs. Brian Williams probably wet himself when he heard about that, and Fareed Zakaria, Trump became president today. Like, it's disgusting. And now with Trump, Obama just was pretty evil, and he set the Middle East on fire and just had these little restraints, just kind of restrained. And he killed a bunch of civilians, thousands of them, took us from 2 wars to 7. And here's the final quote I will leave you with. Jean Baz, a tall, sturdy man, said that 2 of his brothers were killed in drone strikes a year ago, and that he believes it is his duty to fight the Americans and their allies. Another fighter, barely 20 years old, claimed that his father had been killed by an American drone, which led him to join the Insurgents. So once again, we are creating more terrorists to feed the war machine. We are not stopping terrorism at all. Such a reaction can be expected, said Patricia Grossman, a senior researcher on Afghanistan and Human Rights Watch. Each civilian death for which U.S. or NATO forces are perceived to be responsible increases hostility toward them and may increase support for anti-government forces, she said. Keep bombing away, Trump, you fucking idiot. You're just creating more terrorists. We are not making this country safer. We are actually making it worse. And when we overthrow governments like in Syria, we create more refugees. Everyone's like, oh, why are we're not helping refugees. Well, we created it. We're blowing everything up in the Middle East, and then we're shocked that there's millions of refugees. I went over to Afghanistan 3 times, and I'm proud of doing shows over there. I'm proud of, making people laugh who are in a tough situation that they volunteered for, whatever my thoughts on war are. And as I've said, I've had a commanding officer say that whenever comedy shows would come through the fire bases, the suicide rate dropped. So I'm proud of doing that. But I'm not really that proud of being an American, and this is what we're doing. We're just blowing up civilians. And how much money have we spent on this? How many schools could we have built right here in America? How many homeless people could we have gotten off the streets and gotten treatment for their mental illness? Instead, we're just killing civilians and creating more terrorists. We're actually making the world less safe by doing this. Thanks for watching the show. Thanks for listening to it on iTunes. Like and subscribe and support the Patreon. The link is below.